Hello. I'm slowly letting everyone in. Tomorrow I'm gonna in for everyone.
Perfect.
Hi, hello. Welcome. So we'll get going in just a minute or so. I'm just letting everyone in. Thanks for joining us here tonight. We're super excited to have you. Tamara, you can hear me, you can see me.
I can hear
Audience, you can hear us. We'd love some engagement. Let us know, give us a thumbs up. Just want to make sure you can hear us and see us. Thank you. Awesome. Cool. Lots of thumbs up. Perfect. Awesome. Okay, so we'll get going in about 30 seconds or so. Should be fantastic. Okay, so I don't want to I don't want to wait any longer. I'm super excited for this. I know you are too, Tamara, and I want to be mindful of time, I think, more than anything. So my name is Andrea. I will be your moderator tonight. I'm with Juris Education. Tamara will be presenting herself in one quick minute. Tonight's webinar is called Everything You Need to Know Before Applying to Law School. So I do have just a couple of housekeeping rules, so to speak. First and foremost, this webinar is recorded, so you will receive a recording in your inbox within a day or two. If you do need to pop out, please don't worry. We'll make sure it gets to you. You can review it. You can share it with your network. You can go back and add to your notes. It's yours to keep. In terms of how long tonight's webinar is, we're looking at 45 minutes, 30 minutes of conversations, and then 15 minutes towards the end of that Q&A session where you'll really be able to ask Tamar questions, whether it's, a specific law school, about a specific law school experience, or about some of the content that we went over tonight. Well, for whatever reason, Tamar, is it not changing for you?
It says slide 2, but it's showing me slide 1.
Okay, give me 1 minute, everyone. Let's try this again. Oh my goodness, technical difficulties. Gotta love them. Oh, perfect.
It's working for me now.
Thanks, Tamar. So a brief overview of tonight's agenda. We'll be speaking about the best time to start your JD application. We'll speak about crafting a stellar application, the importance of LSAT scores and choosing the right law schools, and of course, maximizing your chances of acceptances, as well as navigating the law school admission process and what that actually looks like. And my screen changed, correct?
Yep.
Awesome. Okay, so I want to just take a quick minute because I know that there's a ton of new faces in the audience who might not know who Juris is and what we do and who we are and why we really are the experts within this space. So who is Juris Education? Juris Education is a globally recognized law school admissions consulting firm offering comprehensive support from test prep to law school admissions and even bar exam tutoring. With a 94% acceptance rate, our students gain entry into the top law schools in the United States. Last cycle alone, our T4 acceptance rate was 34%, which is almost 6 times higher than the national average of 5.7%. We believe in starting the law school application process as early as possible. For college sophomores, we offer pre-law advising and profile development. This focuses on building each student's professional cover letter and resume to highlight their most meaningful experiences and elevate their profile. To help candidates stand out, we assist in enhancing transcripts and GPA, identifying organizations and internships, creating a timeline for LSAT and application prep, and pinpointing specific areas of interest. Our goal is to help students gain a strong foundation and understand what schools are looking for while building a profile that sets them apart from other applicants. While our counselor supports students in building their profiles, our LSAT coaches work closely with them to provide personalized one-on-one tutoring. Students take an official LSAT diagnostic test so tutors can assess their strengths and weaknesses. This helps create a custom study plan structure for the days, weeks, and of course, months ahead. We tailor our approach to each student's unique needs and schedule, providing the right assessments and lessons as they become familiar with the test content, strategies, and format. Interim tests monitor and track progress, allowing us to modify study plans and build an upward trend leading towards that official test date. On average, we do see a 12-point increase for 45 plus hours of tutoring, and we do offer a 165 plus LSAT guarantee with our 60-hour program. Once we've helped shape an outstanding candidate, we support creating the perfect application, which is why you're here tonight. Law schools review applications holistically, and we assist with every step of the process. Our support starts with detailed profile analysis, diving deep into the student's stats and experiences. This guides the creation of a well-balanced list of target, safety, and reach schools. We also help build strong resumes and obtain letters of recommendation from the right recommenders. Our services continue through the interview process and include waitlist strategy support and scholarship assistance until students receive their acceptances. Our admissions counselors, who are also essay writing experts, will brainstorm, outline, and edit your supplemental essays and personal statements until they are perfect. These essays showcase the best aspects of our students, connecting their life journeys with the theme of each school they're applying to. Whether it's your main application or scholarship essays, we offer unlimited edits. Overall, our goal is to build the perfect candidate and application. We utilize every tool in our skill set to ensure the products we create with our students stand out from the rest. We're excited to assist you with the process and look forward to one of our consultations. With that being said, I'd love to pass it over to Tamar, who I know is patiently waiting. Just a brief moment. Maria, unfortunately, was not able to be with us here tonight, but we look forward to having her on one of our other webinars.
You all are stuck with just me tonight, and I hope that will be okay with you. I'm Tamara Alexanian. I use she, her pronouns. I went to Vanderbilt University for my undergraduate degree. I double majored in English and gender studies, and I had a minor in human and organizational development. After undergrad, I spent a year in Taiwan as a Fulbright scholar, and then a year in Chicago as an AmeriCorps member. And then I went to law school at the University of Michigan, graduated from there, and since then have been primarily focusing on public interest issues with a specialty in children welfare. So representing kids, representing parents, that sort of thing. Most recently, I was doing policy work for juvenile justice youth. And now I am a law school professor at American University in Washington, D.C. So that is kind of what my background is. I am super excited to chat with you all tonight. I've been doing consulting work for a few years now, and I love it. I think it's really hopefully helpful to you all. I know that it was so helpful and important to me to get perspectives on my application and get insights and get help and get edits. And so I hope that you all find someone to help you do that. And of course, Juris is here to do that for you if you need help. So when to start your JD application? The answer is, I feel like a lot of times the answer is like in kindergarten, right? Like forever ago. If you're really thoughtful and purposeful and have the time, lots of folks start their applications essentially a year in advance. I will also say that that's not totally necessary, right? Like I know lots of people who started their application the summer before they were applying. They nailed their LSAT right away. They were really strong writers. They got their writing, their essays done. They had recommenders lined up. They got their recommendation letters done, and they had all their stuff in by Thanksgiving or the holidays. That is totally possible. However, if you are someone who struggles with personal statement writing, and to be honest, personal statement writing is awkward. Like it's hard. It's not what most of us are used to. So if that's going to be hard for you, or if you are struggling with the LSAT, it's really common to take a full year to really prep your materials, get that LSAT score where you want it to be. I had a good friend in college who spent 2 years working on her LSAT score, and I think ultimately got a 180, which is what she was looking for. So the LSAT is and we'll get into the LSAT soon, but it's definitely a test that you can study for and you can learn. So there's no harm in starting early, right? You don't want to be caught in a situation where you are down to the wire and you don't have your materials ready, or you don't have your LSAT score where you want it to be, and you're still trying to apply that cycle, because that feeling is not super fun for anyone. So creating a JD application timeline. I am an organized human. I think that the application process does really well, or is easier to do when you are tracking lots of things, especially if you have lots of applications out there, right? There are lots of folks who applied to 20 plus schools, and there's just a ton of moving parts. And you don't ever want to miss any part at all, between, wrangling your recommendation letters and your LSAT, and making sure that LSAC has gotten your transcripts, and there's just so many pieces. So it's really helpful to stay organized. You obviously want to start with your LSAT test date. You might even buffer in a secondary LSAT test date if you are, an anxious tester, or don't love testing, or your diagnostic test scores are lower than you want them to be. And that would be, like I was saying before, 6 to 12 months before your application deadlines, ideally. Again, it can be longer than that. It can be shorter than that. It really depends on the applicant, but that's kind of the rule of thumb that Juris uses. You want to make sure that you give yourself time for getting the score back, deciding how you feel about that score, signing up for another LSAT if you need to. And then after that, you'll build a timeline based on drafting personal statements. You'll know best how long it will take you to draft those. Sometimes people take a ton of time to brainstorm and then no time to write. Other times people take, kind of the opposite approach. And then you'll have lots of supplemental essays. You'll have, why do you want to come to this law school? You'll have what used to be called a diversity statement, and I think they're calling it like perspective statements now. Some schools have like really unique, like Georgetown has like 20 topics every year. I think it's like one of them is like list your top 10 list of anything. So, and you have like 250 words. So that essay obviously will be fun to write, but you can't reuse. So you want to make sure that you buffer in all that time, not to mention the time that you're going to need to spend asking your recommenders and then like following up with them, because sometimes they forget or they get busy or any of those things. So you have to make sure that you spend some time with making sure that they're doing what they need to do. And sometimes they'll ask you to review their letters. Sometimes they'll ask you to send your complete application to them before they'll write your recommendation letter. And so, that if they're asking for your whole application before they'll even start writing your letter, that will delay things even more. So all that to say, it is good to kind of get a bird's eye view early in the game and try and figure out, okay, around what time do I want this piece done? Around what time do I want this piece done? Around what time do I want this piece done? And it's helpful to work backwards, right? So you can go backwards by deadline, but as many of you know, law school admissions are rolling. The best chance of getting in is applying the day that they open. That's likely not going to happen for most people, but the earlier you can aim, the better your shot is. So those are all things to make sure that you're considering when you build out a timeline. So this is a total sample timeline. I will say it until I'm blue in the face. Timelines will look different for everyone. It totally depends on the kind of tester you are. It totally depends on how many schools you're applying to. If you're working for full-time, if you're a student, like all of these things impact what a timeline would look like. But this one that Juris has, March and April is kind of the starting school research, requesting recommendation letters. That's when, you'll say like, I'm thinking about applying to law school, or I am applying to law school. Would you be willing to be a recommender? And what materials do you need from me to do that? Some of them might even ask you to like write a draft of a letter. So that ends up on your to-do list, right? Set up your summer to boost your profile. So if that means like making sure that you have an internship or a job or any of those things, if you are a student, if you are working full-time or already are out of school, that might not be terribly relevant, but you could think about doing additional volunteer work if that might bolster your application. May, studying for the LSAT. June, creating the LSAC account and registering with CAS to request your transcripts. The transcripts they're not kind of instantaneous. They can take a couple of weeks to run through the CAS system. Plus, it's a money-making system for LSAC. You have to pay to get the CAS report done. So make sure that you do that. And if there are any hiccups, you give yourself time to correct those. June through August, taking the LSAT. August, build up your law school resume. Law school resumes sometimes look different than resumes in other industries. So make sure that you're kind of looking at examples, getting feedback, making sure that it's really what a law school admissions officer is expecting to see. Handing in a resume that's like really unique is not kind of the best way to shine in a law school application situation. Narrow down your list of schools based on your profile, based on, fit, based on your LSAT score. You want kind of a good mix of reach, target, and safety schools. In September, you'll fill out the LSAC application. You can't fill everything in until the application's open. Most applications open September 1. That's not always true, but most of them do. You'll want to develop your first drafts of your personal statement. You'll want to brainstorm and write out first drafts of your school-specific statements. Some of them are optional, some of them are not. My general advice is if you are a halfway decent writer, you should try and do the school-specific essays. If you know off the bat that your writing will hurt you more than help you, then maybe you consider not doing the supplemental essays. But I have never met a student where that applies to them. I think most people who are applying to law school know that writing is a big piece of being a lawyer and are halfway decent writers. And so the supplemental essays really just give extra insight into who you are and your writing, and that can really help bolster an application. October, submitting applications for early decision. If that's something you're doing, a lot of times that's binding. So oftentimes you can only apply to one school with like an early decision option. Work on your applications you're submitting for regular decision. November, complete the rest of all of your applications. Make sure that you've secured all the requirements before you've submitted. That includes rec letters. Most places won't even review your application if all of your rec letters aren't in. So that one forgetful professor could be holding up your whole application. So make sure that doesn't happen. Then interview invitations will maybe start coming out depending on the school. Every school does interview things differently. So some schools don't do interviews at all. Some schools do group interviews. Some schools do individual interviews in person, online. There's a whole, lots of schools do different things. So I would say don't panic if you're not getting interviews. If you are getting some interviews, that's great. But again, it's all very, very school specific. And then December, make sure you finish all of your application things. Most of them are due January, February-ish. And again, the earlier you apply, the better. And then January through April, you're going to start getting your admissions decisions. And if you get multiple offers, you need to evaluate those options. If you want to defer, that's something that you could do at that time. If you are on wait lists, you might need to kind of be playing the wait list game and sending additional information to the schools. If you are worried about financial aid, sometimes you can kind of play the schools against each other to get a better financial aid package from different schools. So it is as you can see, it's a busy process. There is a lot of moving pieces, and this is kind of why we say that it's important to have a timeline and have a sense of like around when you're trying to do things so none of the things fall through the cracks. So crafting a stellar application, you of course want to write an impactful personal statement. Your personal statement is really a key piece of your application. It should highlight unique experiences to you. It shouldn't be an essay that really anyone else in the world could write, right? It needs to be really personal about you. It can talk about, the moment you figured out that you wanted to go to law school, what is drawing you to law school, stories about like growth or a moment where you like learn something about yourself or learn something about seeing the world differently. Those are really good topics often. You want something that I often say, like, you want it rooted or grounded in a story. Anecdotes are really helpful, getting into your brain, like hearing your reflections, hearing your feelings, like kind of go back to some of the things you learned in even like school around using your senses, using sensory things to talk about what you were experiencing in those moments. There should be a lot of talking about yourself, not in kind of a rude, like cocky sort of way, more in a, like, it is a story about you. And so it shouldn't be, I read a personal statement a couple weeks ago, and it was a story about someone's best friend. And ultimately, I think it was a personal statement for the best friend, right? Like the author themselves had had written so much about their friend that they essentially were like invisible in the personal statement. And I was like, this is lovely if you're writing it for your friend, but you're not, you're writing it for you. So you have to make sure that you're really inserting yourself as the center of the essay. And I know that's really awkward, and most of us are not used to that because that's not, that's not what academic writing is. That's not what we're used to in college, but that's personal statement writing, and it can be really, really awkward, but what you have to do. Secure strong letters of recommendation. You want someone or people, not just one, but people who can really talk about your academic abilities, leadership qualities that you have, the potential that you have for succeeding in law school or in the legal profession generally. They should be focusing on your strengths. A lot of times, really strong letters also talk about specific instances. Like, it doesn't just say, Tamara's a hard worker. It would say, Tamara's a hard worker, and here's a story about her that shows that she's a hard worker, and this is how I know. There are some really strong, Juris has some great materials online about what makes a strong letter of recommendation, and also the formatting. If you have people that you're asking who are maybe less familiar with writing a letter of application, letter of recommendation, or maybe have never written a letter for law school, sending examples can be really helpful for them. So your LSAC application, you should get very familiar with the LSAC platform. LSAC is Law School Admissions Council. It centralizes all of your materials. All schools use LSAC to put their applications up, right? It makes it in a lot of ways easy for you all to kind of track where you are with applications and what's submitted and when they were submitted. And your recommendations can send one recommendation and it can be like sent to all the schools. So all of those things are great pieces of what LSAC is. I would say at the very beginning, sometimes students need to spend a little bit of time kind of like playing around with it to see like, okay, where is this? Where are the rec letters? Where do I find this? And so early on, I suggest just like playing around a little bit and making sure you are comfortable with the platform, because you'll be spending a lot of time using it. You'll submit your essential applications there. Make sure that your transcripts get there, your LSAT scores get there. Obviously, you'll upload your personal statement, your letters of recommendation. You'll plug in the people, your recommenders' information, and LSAC will send them an automated email with instructions on how to upload their rec letter. And you'll just want to make sure that all of these pieces are moving forward and that LSAC has received everything so that there's not a delay. And so if you see, you're trying to get a CAS, a CAS, like transcript and making sure that yours goes through, and it's like 1 week goes by, okay, 2 weeks goes by, you're like, I don't know. That's a time when you would call LSAC and be like, what's going on? Do you need me to resubmit? Like, I want to make sure that this isn't holding anything up. So making sure that you're staying on top of what is going on in your LSAC portal.
So I'm quickly going to hop in the chat to see how everyone is doing. We have a ton of questions tomorrow. So I think the majority of them we can hold towards the end. I just want to be mindful of time. There's a couple in there about the LSAT, which I think is a really great topic. But this one I think is the one we can answer right now. So do law schools have an early action program?
So some of them do. I would say the majority that my students have applied to do not, but some of them have started doing kind of like an early action program where it's non-binding. And if you apply by a certain time, they will give you an answer by a certain time, and you are not committed to going to that school. I think those programs are great. Who doesn't want to know early if they're going to if they got accepted? But it is much more common that it's a binding early decision program. So make sure that you read the fine print and make sure you know what you're signing up for.
Awesome. So we have another question that came in, but again, I think we can, because I want to be mindful of time, we can get back to those towards the end.
Great. Perfect. Okay. Now we can talk more about LSAT scores. I think I saw some questions pop up about LSAT. So I would love to sit here and say, like, the LSAT doesn't matter. You are more than your test score, and you are more than your test score, but that LSAT does matter. Schools still place a pretty significant weight on LSAT scores. LSAT scores, fortunately or unfortunately, are a key predictor of how you'll do with your 1L grades, because 1L grades are curved unless you go to a school that has kind of a pass-fail system like Berkeley. So schools care about their LSAT scores because it impacts their ranking. Like, it's all of these things that are very annoying and frustrating to me, but that's kind of what it is. So a higher LSAT score can open the door to more competitive programs. It also really increases your scholarship chances. Especially if you're really worried about money, if you invest more time in studying for the LSAT, it can really pay off later. Preparing for the LSAT, like I said, some people take the LSAT and are super thrilled with their score the first time they take it. I know very few people who can say that happened to them. Generally, I think most people I know tested at least twice. And like I said, my friend who got a 180 studied for like 2.5 years in college. So it is a test that you can learn. It's just something that you have to devote a lot of time to if that's what you are looking for. Retaking is totally fine. Most candidates I work with have do some sort of retaking of the LSAT. Either they canceled the score or they improved their score, and that's fine. And that's okay. Like, that, law schools don't frown upon that at all. Especially if your score goes up. If your score goes down, it's maybe slightly less great. But if your score goes up, that's wonderful, and schools will take the higher score. So improving your LSAT score, you want to find effective study strategies. Those will be different for every single person, right? Like, some people work really well with one-on-one tutors. Some people work really well just like doing a bunch of practice tests and looking at the right answers. There's lots of different ways to study for the LSAT. There's lots of different programs out there for studying. You should do what works best for you. And you want to make sure that you're building enough consistent study time into your schedule, especially if you're a student, especially if you're working. It gets easy to kind of have life get in the way of studying, and making sure that you find time to really consistently devote to studying will be important. Like I said before, LSAT retakes are okay. Very, very common, especially great if they increase your score. Make sure that you're strategic about when you test the first time in case you want to test again. And some people test more than twice. And so make sure that you're giving yourself enough buffer time in case that happens to you and you end up wanting that to be an option. So choosing the right law schools. Aligning your law school choice or law school, you can get a great law school education at a lot of places, right? Like, I don't totally agree with like, there's only one right school. I feel like we say that kind of a lot for like college, but lots of law schools have really amazing programs. Most law schools, many law schools, like, there are tons of great schools and programs out there. There are strategic decisions that you can make around why you would go to one school over another school, right? So some programs are stronger in certain areas. There are some schools known for international law. There are some schools known for public interest. There are some schools that have really high bar passage rates. There are some schools that have really great externship programs. There are some schools that have like good job placement post graduation. Like all schools kind of have different things that they're best at or good at. And so if you already are set on an area of law that you want to go into, that could be a way to kind of help narrow what schools would be a good fit for you. It's also something to know that I like hadn't maybe known before I was doing law school applications. A lot of people kind of stay more local after law school. And so like I went to Vanderbilt, but for undergrad, but I wasn't planning on staying in the South after I graduated. It's much more common to go to law school in the state or the region that you're planning on practicing. And so it is, if you like went to law school in Florida, but were like, I'm planning on practicing in California, that would be much more unusual because there's a lot of networking that happens in law school, and there's a lot of kind of law school connections that you are expected to build on. So geography is definitely something that you should consider if you know what state you want to practice in, if you know what area you want to practice in. Some schools, I think when you get higher up in kind of the T14 list, a lot of people go to T14 schools and aren't going to stay in those states. But when you're further down on the rankings list, it's much more common that schools are expected to kind of help you build connections in the local community because you will be staying kind of in the region or the state. It's not impossible not to, but it's a good thing to kind of keep in mind and something that I hadn't thought about before I went to law school. So those are all kind of things that you can consider. And again, it's not like there's only one school that's good at international law, or there's only one school that's good at tax law. Like there are lots of schools, but thinking about what programs you'd be most interested in and what would matter to you in a school can really help you make sure that you're applying to schools that would be a good fit. Researching schools for fit, make sure you investigate the school's culture, look at their values. You can find that through their websites, through their social media. You can look at like current student or former student testimony. Sometimes you can reach out to current students, or they have programs where you can talk to current students. Some schools have like admitted student stays, right? And that gives you kind of a good vibe check of like, okay, how would I feel if these people were my classmates? All those things can be really, really helpful information. Bar passage rates, employment outcomes, those are things that matter a lot, right? Like you don't want to graduate and be like, look, I did law school for 3 years and I'm having trouble passing the bar, or I can't find a job and my school is not really helping me. Like those are not situations that I would have wanted to be in. So those kind of numbers or statistics can be really helpful to help you identify schools that will provide support for that stuff if that's something that you're worried about. Like I said, you can attend in-person law school events if the law schools offer them. Some of them, I feel like post-COVID especially, or since COVID, there are virtual law school events that can give you a really helpful idea, give you sometimes FaceTime with law school admissions officers or current students. You can ask questions. Sometimes even faculty do those. Those are great opportunities to ask thoughtful questions and kind of get a read on if it would be a fit for you. You might want to consider financial aid options. Some students don't have to worry about that at all. That was something I did have to worry about. And so you can do research on what schools provide what types of financial aid, right? Are there schools that do need-based? Are there schools that do merit? What sort of merit scholarships are available? Sometimes there are scholarships that are available for binding early decision only. So that's something to consider. So all of those things kind of play into if the school will be a good fit for you. So to maximize your chances of acceptance, I say often to my students, the worst case scenario is you get in nowhere, right? Like that is a situation that would make me cry if I were a student. And so you want to make sure that you're hitting a good number of schools that are in the reach, target, and safety category. Do not snooze on the safety category. You could end up kind of in a really weird year where everyone's LSAT is amazing and you're competing with people, the application pool is much more competitive than it should have been or you thought it would be. There are just lots of things that can go wonky, especially because it's rolling admissions. So make sure that you're not just applying to reach schools. That is a little bit of a recipe for disaster, and I would hate to see that happen. Make sure you tailor your applications to the schools. That doesn't mean every single application or like every single piece of your application, right? Like your resume is your resume. That won't really change. Often personal statements don't change, and I think that's okay. They don't need to be school specific. Rec letters don't need to change. Those can just say like Dear Admissions Committee and don't need to be about the specific school. But supplemental materials definitely need to be tailored. And I often say like any supplemental essays that are about the school, they need to be so specific that an admissions officer could not think to themselves, oh, they probably could have used this essay for a different school too. So make sure that you're tailoring your application and doing your kind of due diligence and homework on those. Highlight unique experiences. You want to emphasize experiences that you've had that demonstrate leadership and resilience and commitment to social justice, if that's something that matters to you, or anything else that would align with the school's focus, right? Apply early. Like I said before, it's rolling. This is one of my least favorite things about law school admissions. I hate that they are rolling because that means that, you know, every day that goes by, seats are being snagged up. But the earlier you apply, the better shot you have. So what happens after you apply? Admission committees review your application holistically. That means they look at your LSAT score, they look at your GPA, they look at your personal statement, they look at your supplemental statements, they look at your recommendations, look at the whole package. This is part of why they won't review your application before everything is in. That means that if you have one recommender holding out who hasn't done their rec letter, they won't review it. Sometimes they will ask you, like if you have an LSAT score and you didn't like it and you're retaking it, but you get your materials in, sometimes they will email you and say, do you want us to hold review of your application, or do you want us to review based on your score that you've already submitted? So that's kind of how seriously they take, like, are we reviewing now or are we reviewing later? Because you have to know kind of what spot in line you're at. Handling decision outcomes, you have to be ready for different scenarios. You might want to think ahead to like, what happens if I'm accepted here or waitlisted here? What would a deferral look like? What school would I be okay with? What school would I be happy with? What schools would I maybe think about waiting another year and applying again? At what price point does a certain school make sense, right? Like if I get no money one place and tons of money another place, would that change my calculation of if I should go there or not? Those are all things to kind of start thinking about while your application is pending, so that it doesn't all kind of come down to the wire and you don't feel rushed in trying to make some of those big decisions, especially if they're financial and you have to start thinking about like, okay, how much money and loans am I taking out? Do I need to ask family for help? Any of those sorts of things. You want to prep for interviews. Never go into an interview not prepped. That doesn't mean that you sound, robotic and everything is written out, but the internet has lots of good information about the typical questions that each school asks. They have great students or former students or current students are very generous with talking about what their experience was like interviewing at a certain place. That information can be so helpful to help you prepare. So make sure you practice common law school interview questions. Make sure you look up the school and you feel like you understand why that school is a good fit for you, why they should want you, why you want them, why it's a good match. Review your application materials again before you go into that interview, so that if those materials are brought up, you're not like, I don't remember what I wrote for this school. That sort of thing. And again, if you work with someone at Juris Education, we often help do mock interviews and do interview prep. Treat your waitlist notifications as opportunities. They are opportunities. It is a time where you can show continued interest. Admissions officers expect you to send them emails, expect you to send updates on how you're doing and saying that you're still interested. The waitlist game is not always fun, but it often works. So don't take it kind of as a sign of defeat. It is definitely an opportunity to kind of level up and show them like, I really want to come here. And they let students off the wait list up until the first day of class. And I think my 1L year, someone was accepted after the first week. So at some point you might not want to, change plans. If you miss the first week of school, that might feel like too much for you, but it is truly an ever evolving situation depending on who drops out, who moves, who decides to defer a year, all of those things. Consider submitting updated resume or additional letters of recommendation if you're on the wait list. If you defer, make sure you stay in contact with the admissions office. You want to continue to express your enthusiasm and show that you want to be going to that school. Make backup plans if this cycle doesn't go the way you wanted to. Or if you defer and you get another year of pre-law freedom, what would you do at that time? And just stay patient and proactive throughout the decision-making process. It can be really stressful, but you all can handle it. So common mistakes to avoid: don't miss deadlines. Do not miss deadlines. Lawyers will not be sympathetic to missing deadlines. Deadlines are very important in our field, and so this will not look good. This means that you need to be on top of LSAC deadlines, but it also means that once you've applied, sometimes they email you asking for additional materials, or they email you about the interview, right? Those don't come through LSAC. They'll be on your email. So make sure that you are super responsive to email. You get them either on your phone, or you have a set time every single day where you check your email and you respond right away. You don't want to kind of leave those things lingering. It is not a super great look. Don't submit generic things. I think I mentioned this before, but you don't want to, especially for supplemental essays, they need to be specific to the school. A lot of schools ask for why do you want to come to this law school? And if you're saying things like, you have a great contracts class, every law school has a contracts class. They know that that's not specific to their school. So make sure you're really thinking about what makes the school unique. And that often means you can't recycle why X law school statement, but that's okay, right? It's more important that you nail those essays and make them really good and solid and believable than, saving yourself a little bit of time by recycling an essay. And don't overlook the rec letters. You want strong and personalized letters. Professors are great. Employers, supervisors, pre-law advisors, any of those sorts of things. If you volunteer somewhere and have volunteered there for a while, sometimes a volunteer coordinator can be great. It's more important that you get someone who can speak to who you are and your character and your work ethic than someone who has a title. So sometimes I get students who are like, well, my dad's brother's friend is a judge and he said he'd write me a rec letter. And my answer to that is, have you worked for him? Does he know anything about how you work? Has he been supervising your work? Because if the answer to those questions is no, then that person has no business writing you a rec letter, even if they have, a very fancy title. Final steps. Review for accuracy and completeness. You want to double check, triple check, quadruple check. Lawyers don't like typos or spelling errors or grammatical errors, and you want to make sure that your application is pristine. Proofread your personal statement, proofread all of your statements, to be honest. Make sure it's clear, make sure that you're happy with the narrative that you're putting forward. Make sure that you're not missing any information, make sure that you are in compliance with school-specific requirements. Some schools say very specifically, 11-point font, Arial, under 3 pages. Some schools say 12-point font or larger, right? You want to make sure that you're following every school specific requirement or guidance that they provide. Final tips: stay organized, meet your deadlines, be authentic. Do not pretend to be someone you're not. They will know. And you're looking for a match, right? You want a law school that wants you and that thinks your story is compelling just as much as you want to pick a school that is a good fit for you. So it is a disservice to you and to the whole process to kind of just try and be like, I want to tell a story and it doesn't feel super authentic to me, but I think this is what they want to hear. They want to hear your voice. They want to hear who you are. They want to know who they're admitting to their school. And so just be that. be exactly who you are. Think about the things you're proud of. Think about the things that make you who you are. Think about the moments in your life that have really impacted you and changed you, and use those as starting points for drafting personal statements or other essays, right? All of us have compelling stories to tell about who we are and why we are the way we are. And there's lots of really good stories that each of us can tell. Staying proactive after submission. After you submit, you're not done, right? You're often kind of waiting for interview things. You're prepping for interviews. You can continue researching schools. Some schools let you attend virtual events. Some schools will let you come to campus and sit in on a class. Any of those sorts of things are great opportunities. It's not time to snooze yet. It will be time to relax after you have selected a school, but make sure that you're still kind of staying active in that process. I think we are finally at Q&A.
We are officially at Q&A, so we have a ton. Hopefully we can answer. We're going to try and work through as many as possible, but of course we want to be mindful of time. So let's get going. Regarding retaking LSATs, if one receives a higher LSAT score than the one they've had on record after they've already started applying, will the higher one be taken?
I'm reading this because I want to make sure I understand it. So the answer is yes, if it's in when they review your application. So if you took the August LSAT, got a score you didn't like, applied to law school in September, all of your material is in, and then you sign up to take the October LSAT, if they review your application, they might review your application right in September when you submitted it, and that means your October test won't be in. Schools will often email you and ask, do you want us to hold your application? That means that they won't hold your spot in line. That means that they will wait to review your application until your new score comes in. But if your new score is in, so like, let's change the scenario. You took the August LSAT, you didn't like your score. You took the September LSAT, you liked your score, you applied in October. So both scores were in, they will look at your higher score. I'm hoping that answered, David, I see that was your question. I hope that answered your question sufficiently.
Yes, please let us know. So we have a question regarding letters of rec. How many letters of rec do you recommend? And is 3 to 4 too many?
No, so a lot of schools require 3 to 5. I say the sweet spot is 4. I don't think there's anything wrong with doing the maximum. I also, I will go back to what I said before, like, do not get bad letters. If you're like, I only have 3 solid letters and then I could get my family friend to write a 4th, or like I could ask a professor, but I haven't seen them in 10 years. Like, don't do that. Just do your 3 solid ones. Ignore the ones that would be like awkward to ask for, or, they don't know you that well. Like, don't do that. But if you have, you're like, oh, I have a bunch of professors that I'm in touch with and all of them want to write me letters of rec. Great. 4 to me is the perfect spot to be at.
Awesome. So I love this question. It actually talks about extracurriculars and what the best extracurriculars are to be a part of. This individual also asks if it should be law school specific, or do colleges prefer that a person is a bit more well-rounded?
Yeah, so I say often, I did not know I wanted to go to law school until way after college. My dad had always been like, you're an English major, what are you going to do with that? And I was like, I'll figure it out later. And I later decided like, oh, maybe I'll go to law school. So none of my law school or my college activities were law school related. And I was nervous about that myself. And I have found that a lot of people go to law school without law school specific activities. Some people do, right? Some people had lawyers in their family. Some people, like, since they were 5, have been like, I want to be a public defender. That's not me. That was also not a lot of my colleagues. And that won't be used against you. You do want to be able to have kind of a narrative around what activities you're involved in, though, right? Like, my narrative has always been like, I'm public interest. I've always been public interest. I've always volunteered. I've always been involved in my community. Those are things that are important to me. And even though I had no legal experience before I went to law school, I had no legal internships. I had never worked at a firm. Like, I had nothing. I was still able to say, like, my extracurriculars show that I'm really dedicated to public interest work. So you should do things you care about. You should, if that means that you care about, pre-law things, that's totally okay. If you're like nerdy that way, that's great. If you're not, that's okay too. You should do things that you care about. And then kind of on the back end with folks at Juris or whoever your mentors are, you can come up with the best ways to craft that narrative when you're making, when you're getting your application materials ready. But generally speaking, it's okay if they're not legal related. And you should do the things that you love, because that will shine through in your application. And if it's okay if those things don't totally have the perfect narrative. You might love basketball and also love volunteering, and that's okay. No admissions officer is going to be like, you can't love exercising and helping people. Like, that's okay.
It looks like I missed a question or a couple. So somebody asked us how long LSAT scores are actually valid for.
I think the latest is 5 years. So they last for quite a while, which is part of why you can take them really early and then kind of snooze on your application and be like, I'll apply in a couple of years. I really like my score and I don't have to apply right now. And I have a job that I like, and I'm going to take another year off. Right. Which is, again, part of why Juris says you can start really early on the LSAT piece. And we recommend starting early, because you might get a score you love. You very likely will get a score that you want to improve on.
So I think this is a really great transition. We have a ton of questions. I don't think we're going to be able to answer any of them, or all of them tonight, I should say. If by chance your question doesn't get answered, we recommend booking just a consultation where you can actually ask these questions to one of our admission experts. Additionally, you could also email us as well, because I know we have individuals in here asking us sort of about specific letters of recommendation and what transferring in law school from law school would look like. So those kind of questions, we either have some really great resources on, or of course one of our admissions experts can help. So Ryan asks us, for people that wish to add an addendum to their transcript, when is this appropriate to do, and how should this be done? Tamara, maybe you can just touch a little bit about what an addendum would look like for law school applications.
Yeah, so I will start by saying not every applicant will have an addendum. An addendum, you should have a pretty good reason to include one, right? An addendum is generally something that explains something in your application that maybe needs explanation or doesn't make sense. Oftentimes, like a good example is if you've ever had like a run-in with the law, you often need to write a character and fitness addendum to disclose to the admissions officers that you've had a run-in with the law, because they have to know that, because you'll have to disclose it to the bar. And if you didn't disclose it to the school and you disclose it to the bar, there can be problems getting barred. So that's an example of an addendum that's quite common. A lot of times it's not for like traffic violations, right? We're talking about like DUIs or like theft, or, like kind of bigger crimes than just traffic tickets. And you'll need to find a way to explain that. There are other times that you need to explain things, like if something went really bad with your LSAT score, I will kind of put an asterisk and say, just because you get a bad LSAT score does not mean you should write an addendum. So I would consult with folks about when it's appropriate to write an addendum and when it's not. I'm trying to think, sometimes if people took like time off of school, they had like a family emergency one semester, or like a death in the family, they had to withdraw from school. Those are sometimes things that you would write a short addendum about to kind of explain why there's a gap, or that something significant happened that couldn't otherwise really be explained to an admissions officer. So Ryan, I hope that answered your question.
Yes, please let us know, Ryan. So it looks like we have time for one more question. I see two questions in here about this topic, so that's why we're just going to skip ahead. Somebody asked, or two individuals asked us to elaborate on maintaining an open line of communication during the waiting process and what that actually entails. And Ryan says, yes, thank you.
Great. So I think there are two times to kind of have communication, right? So one of them is after you apply, and you haven't heard anything. When you haven't heard anything, that's the time to kind of go on admissions websites and see if there are like virtual things that you can do, if they have, or if you're in a city where admissions officers come through. Sometimes they do that, and they have they host kind of events or like information talks. Sign up for those, go to those, get FaceTime with the admissions officer, introduce yourself, take a copy of your resume in case they ask for it, right? So those are how to kind of stay involved in that way. I would not be like, don't harass them. Like, don't email them every day. Don't be annoying. You just want to kind of show that you're still interested and take part in whatever things they offer already, right? The next thing to show interest is once you've been waitlisted. Once you've been waitlisted, you have more clearer things that you need to do to demonstrate you're interested, because you are essentially fighting for a spot and you are fighting other people to get that spot. So what that means is you will write letters of continued interest. Those are often letters to the admissions officers in kind of PDF, like pretty formal format, explaining why you're still interested, explaining what you've been doing since you've been waitlisted, any updates on your resume, any updates on like grades, any of those sorts of things. Again, like a Juris Education consultant can help with that, but those are expected essentially monthly when you're sitting on a wait list. And so you need to be really actively still pursuing and, writing those and then sending them to admissions officers. And that's how you stay engaged once you've been waitlisted.
Amazing. So we're almost at the hour. So I think this is a really great time to wrap it up. Unfortunately, again, I want to apologize. We weren't able to get to all of the questions tonight, but we do recommend you get in touch and we can go through those. Just a quick note, I see a ton of questions about the LSAT. We have an entire webinar dedicated to the LSAT on October 24th, I believe. It should be on our website. If it's not, I'll make sure it gets up on the website in the next little bit, where we really get into the nitty-gritty about the LSAT, what it looks like, strategies, insider tips, et cetera, et cetera. I just had to throw that out there for all the really great LSAT questions in there. But with that being said, Tamara, thank you so much for joining us tonight. Thank you for sharing your area of expertise. As always, it was a pleasure having you. To a wonderful audience, thank you for the wonderful engagement. Thank you for the questions. And thanks, Tamara. Thank you. Tamara, you're getting lots of love.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, very much. We appreciate you being here, and please don't hesitate to get in touch. If you did not get your question answered, please reach out. We will make sure they get answered one way or another. With that being said, I hope everyone has a wonderful evening, and we'll see you on the next webinar.